Imagine a machine, right? Like a literal machine with levers and buttons that possesses the legal authority to just, well, to instantly erase your entire life.
Oh, just completely wipe it out.
Exactly. With the pull of a single lever, this machine can legally mandate that you are stripped of your home. You lose your job. You lose your privacy.
Your contact with your family, too.
Yes, all of it. It can dictate when you eat, when you sleep, and when you are actually allowed to step outside. And the crazy thing is we use this machine every single day in our society.
We do, constantly.
And we just accept this awesome, terrifying power because a wrong has been committed. But despite using it constantly, we almost never stop to actually agree on what this machine is supposed to be doing.
Which is wild when you think about it.
It really is. So, welcome to this deep dive into the source material. We got a massive stack of research today, and we're centering it around one foundational, incredibly heavy query.
Right, the big question.
Should our prisons aim to punish, protect, or transform?
It is, it's really the ultimate dilemma of justice. And to really grasp the stakes of that question, you have to look at the sheer staggering scale of what incarceration actually removes from a human being.
Because we use the word prison so casually, right?
Exactly. We say it like it's just a timeout. But think about the actual anatomy of that deprivation. We're talking about the total, absolute removal of freedom of movement.
You can't just walk to the fridge when you want.
Right. And the complete erasure of privacy.
Right.
You're living for years, sometimes decades, under constant surveillance, just surrounded by complete strangers.
The psychological toll of that alone it's hard to even fathom.
It is. And then there's the suspension of ordinary family life. You know, you're missing the births, the funerals, just those quiet Tuesday evenings at the dinner table.
The mundane stuff that actually makes up a life.
Yes, the mundane stuff. And most chillingly, it is the wholesale confiscation of years or even decades of a person's future.
Right. So our mission today, for you listening, is to completely deconstruct the three competing goals behind that massive confiscation.
Because they really do compete.
They do. We're going to explore how punishment, protection, and transformation actually conflict with each other in the real world, and then we'll try to outline exactly what a morally legitimate system would look like, based entirely on the material we're diving into today.
Because, like you said, we accept the what of prison. You know, the physical walls, the locked doors.
We all know what a prison looks like.
Right. But we are deeply, deeply fractured on the why.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Are we locking people up primarily to inflict pain because they caused pain?
Or are we doing it merely to build like a concrete wall between a dangerous individual and the rest of us?
Or option 3, are we doing it to fundamentally fix something that is broken? The core problem we face is that these three objectives, they do not sit neatly side by side on a shelf.
No, they don't. They actively push against one another.
Right. If you optimize a facility purely for punishment, you often completely destroy its capacity for transformation.
You really do.
So let's begin with the most visceral, instinctive goal, the one that probably bubbles up first for most of you listening when you think about justice, and that's punishment.
It's the default reaction for most people.
It is. The material lays out what is called the retributive idea, and this is the foundational concept that people who commit severe wrongs simply must face consequences.
It's the idea that a prison sentence is society's way of communicating a very specific, tangible message.
Exactly. What's fascinating here is how deeply this concept of retribution ties into the very architecture of human moral responsibility.
Oh, definitely. We often think of punishment as just pure anger. But the sources show it's much more structural than that.
How so?
Well, if we were to never punish deliberate wrongdoing, we would be broadcasting this really devastating counter message to the world. We would essentially be implying that choices do not matter.
Wow. Yeah, that's a dangerous message.
Right. We would be telling victims that the harm done to them is just irrelevant to society at large.
So imagine a scenario where someone deliberately, like with full premeditation, causes severe harm to another person, and they face absolutely no consequences, no loss of liberty, no trial, just nothing.
It would completely unravel the social contract.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second, because if you look at the modern discourse around crime, there is a very strong tendency to view every offender through a purely clinical, almost sociological lens.
Oh, yeah, the sort of deterministic model.
Right. We constantly hear arguments that people who commit crimes are merely sick. or that their actions were completely, well, socially determined by their zip code or their upbringing or their economic status.
Yes, that model essentially argues that free will is largely an illusion, and therefore pure punishment is illogical.
Right, and this is where it gets tricky. If we treat every single criminal act purely as a symptom of a disease or just a mechanical byproduct of poverty, aren't we accidentally stripping away the offender's humanity?
That's the exact danger the text points out.
It makes me think of how we treat, like, children or pets. If a dog bites you, you don't hold the dog morally accountable. You just say, it's a dog, you didn't know any better.
Right, you don't put the dog on trial for its moral failings.
Exactly. So if we say an adult offender couldn't help themselves, we're essentially treating them like a faulty machine, not an equal human being. So does punishment actually say, I respect you enough to hold you accountable?
That is precisely the argument the text presents, and it is such a profound philosophical pivot. To hold someone responsible is to look them in the eye and say, you are capable of making choices. You are a moral agent, and those choices mattered.
That's powerful.
It really is. Treating an offender merely as a broken mechanism denies a fundamental part of their human dignity.
Which feels totally counterintuitive at first.
Right, it does. So paradoxically, the act of punishment, the act of saying you must pay a price for what you chose to do, can actually express a deep foundational respect for that person as an accountable, conscious agent.
Wow, okay, that reframes the entire concept of retribution for me. It isn't just blind, primitive anger. It is a necessary acknowledgement of human agency.
Exactly.
But, I mean, there's a massive cliff edge right next to that idea, isn't there?
Yeah.
Because holding someone accountable through the loss of their liberty is one thing, but human nature being what it is, that desire for accountability so frequently metastasizes.
It does. It really does. And the text issues a very stark warning about punishment's dangerous shadow, which is revenge.
Revenge.
Right.
This is where the logic of retribution breaks down and just rots. A prison system might begin with this lofty philosophical idea of accountability and moral agency, like we just talked about,
Sure.
but it can incredibly easily slide into the idea that offenders should suffer simply because suffering is what they deserve.
And that is exactly where you see the introduction of deliberate cruelty. It's when a system decides that taking away a person's freedom isn't enough, so they add like extreme isolation.
Yes.
They add systemic humiliation. They just look the other way when violence happens inside the walls, which forces a society to ask a very uncomfortable question about the limits of justice. Does true justice require suffering beyond the loss of liberty itself?
That's the core of it, isn't it?
It is, because as we established at the beginning of this deep dive, the deprivation of freedom is already an agonizing, enormous punishment.
Just taking the years away is massive.
Right. To intentionally make imprisonment more physically or psychologically painful, simply to, increase a quota of suffering that is incredibly hard to morally justify based on the sources.
It feels like the distinction is between the state acting as an arbiter of justice versus the state acting as an abuser.
Precisely. The material draws a very clear, morally serious line here. The deprivation of liberty is the punishment.
The locked doors, the inability to go where you want.
Yes. The separation from your loved ones, that is the consequence. Cruelty should never be added as some supplementary objective.
That makes total sense.
But here's the critical flaw in focusing entirely on retribution. If punishment is entirely focused on addressing what an offender did in the past, it leaves us completely blind to the future.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Right. It doesn't answer the victim's most terrifying, urgent question, which is, are they going to do this to me again?
And that fear, that very real necessity for safety, requires us to pivot from retribution to the second major goal outlined in our sources, which is protecting society.
And this shifts the entire focus from punishment to what the text calls incapacitation.
Incapacitation, right. And we are talking specifically about offenders who present serious, ongoing physical risks.
Yes.
People who repeatedly commit violent assaults, predatory behavior, or are deeply embedded in organized violent crime.
For these specific individuals, the primary goal of the system fundamentally shifts. The guiding question changes.
How so?
It is no longer how much suffering does this person mathematically deserve for what they did in the past. Instead, it becomes what restrictions are absolutely necessary right now to keep innocent people safe.
So the focus moves to the present and the future.
Exactly. For highly dangerous individuals, protection matters vastly more than punishment.
But wait, if the goal is purely to protect society by physically separating this person, doesn't that actually change the way we should be treating them on the inside?
Well, it changes everything. Think about it. A person may absolutely need to remain confined for the safety of the public, right?
Yeah.
But that physical separation does not mean they must be degraded. If the goal is just incapacitation, it does not mean they should be denied education or fed terrible food or treated as less than
For
human.
security and cruelty are not the same thing.
Exactly. The text emphasizes heavily that rigorous physical security and humane, dignified treatment are entirely compatible. You can have an impenetrable perimeter without having a brutal interior.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Because as soon as you shift the justification for locking someone up from what you actually did to what we need to protect society from, you enter some deeply murky, dangerous ethical waters.
You really do. It's a very fine line.
When we look at the moral risk of predicting future crimes in the text,
Mm-hmm.
it instantly makes me think of dystopian sci-fi. It's like the Minority Report problem.
Yes, the pre-crime concept.
Exactly. Are we just locking people up based on a statistical probability what they might do tomorrow?
That is the exact tyranny the sources warn against. If we imprison people indefinitely, primarily because a risk assessment algorithm or a parole board decides they might be dangerous in the future,
Yeah.
well then, the punishment has completely decoupled from a concrete, provable action in the past.
Right. You're no longer punishing a crime, you're punishing a theory.
Exactly. And predictions of dangerousness are notoriously fragile. They are often mistaken. They are deeply susceptible to racial and class biases.
That's a huge issue in the data.
It is. And legally, they are almost impossible for an individual to challenge. I mean, how exactly do you prove in a court of law that you aren't going to do something 5 years from now?
You can't.
Yeah,
You're asking someone to prove a negative about an event that hasn't even occurred yet.
right.
If we aren't careful, we are just punishing people for an imagined future, which sounds like the textbook definition of authoritarianism.
Which is why the goal of protection, while absolutely essential for public safety, must be strictly and aggressively constrained.
The guardrails need to be massive.
Exactly. The text insists it has to be bound by law, governed by strict proportionality, based on hard empirical evidence of past behavior, not just hunches, and subject to regular, rigorous review.
Because a just society cannot simply throw away the key just because we feel uneasy about a statistical stereotype.
Precisely. And the reality is, with very few exceptions, the vast majority of people we send to prison are not going to stay there forever.
No, they are coming back.
They are coming back out into the world.
Which forces us to ask perhaps the most important practical question of this entire deep dive.
Which is?
What actually happens to a human mind and body during that period of confinement?
Because whatever happens to them in there, they are bringing back out here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which perfectly introduces the third vision for the purpose of a prison. Transformation, or what we traditionally call rehabilitation.
Yes.
The transformative ideal.
Yeah.
This model views the offender not just as, like, a static, dangerous criminal to be warehoused in a cell,
Right.
but as a human being who is still fundamentally capable of change. This approach leans heavily into education, vocational training, psychological treatment, and cognitive behavioral therapy. But to really grasp the stakes of this, I want to bypass the abstract philosophy for a second. I want to pose a direct thought experiment to you, the listener, based on the scenarios in our source text.
Okay, let's hear it.
I want you to imagine an offender returning to your neighborhood.
This is the ultimate pragmatic test of a justice system right here.
It really is. So imagine a person who committed a serious offense is being released today, and they're moving into the apartment complex down the street from you.
Hmm.
Do you want them coming out of System A or System B?
Okay, lay out the systems.
Let's look at System A first. In System A, this person has spent the last 10 years experiencing constant hypervigilance. They have faced daily threats of violence, deep psychological isolation, and sensory deprivation.
That sounds horrific.
It gets worse. They've received zero education. They haven't done a single day of meaningful work. Their underlying traumas or addictions have been completely ignored.
So nothing was fixed.
Nothing. They emerge from the prison gates, traumatized, deeply angry, completely disconnected from modern society, and practically unemployable.
They are a pressure cooker with a faulty valve placed directly into your community.
Right. Now imagine System B. The exact same person serves the exact same 10-year sentence for the exact same crime.
Okay.
But during their 10 years, they receive daily education. They go to intense, rigorous therapy. They learn modern vocational skills.
They're actually doing something with the time.
Yes, they are given structured, meaningful responsibilities within the facility, and they go through a graduated preparation program for release. So logically, which person do you want moving in down the street?
I mean, the answer is obvious. And it reveals a profound irony in how society often views rehabilitation.
What do you mean?
Well, if you listen to political discourse, rehabilitation is constantly mocked as being soft on crime. It is framed as, coddling criminals or giving them unearned rewards.
Oh, absolutely. You hear that all the time.
But as your System A versus System B thought experiment proves, rehabilitation is actually the most pragmatic, hard-nosed, effective tool we have for concrete public safety.
Okay, I have to jump in and struggle with this for a second.
Go for it.
Because logically, my brain screams that System B is the only rational choice. If System B actively prevents future victims, it is the better system.
Without a doubt.
But viscerally, emotionally, I'll be honest, if someone severely harmed my family, a dark part of me doesn't want them getting free vocational training and therapy. A part of me wants them to sit in a dark room and suffer.
And that is a completely human reaction.
Right. So how do we reconcile the cold logic of public safety with that raw, fundamentally human demand for retribution?
That tension you're describing is the exact friction point where justice systems usually break down. The expressive emotional desire to punish often completely cannibalizes the practical need to protect.
We get it our own way.
We do. We are willing to sacrifice our own future safety just to ensure the offender suffers in the present.
That is so wild to think about.
But even if a society manages to overcome that emotional hurdle and decides to fund System B, they run into a massive structural wall.
What's the wall?
Because implementing System B isn't just about hiring a few therapists. It requires fighting against the very nature of a prison itself.
Which brings us to what the material calls the toxic paradox.
Yes, the toxic paradox.
We want these institutions to fix people, but we are sending them into ecosystems that are inherently designed to break them down.
Let's dissect this paradox deeply, because it is crucial. Prisons, by their very architectural and operational design, are deeply damaging environments.
We aren't just talking about feeling sad, are we?
No. We are talking about severe, documented psychological and neurological deterioration. The environment demands constant hypervigilance. You can never truly relax.
Always looking over your shoulder.
Exactly. You are subjected to enforced social isolation, which breeds a very dangerous kind of institutional dependence where you essentially forget how to make basic choices for yourself.
Because everything is dictated for you.
Right. And these facilities often act as networking hubs for criminal enterprises, where the only way to survive is to align with violent factions.
It's an environment where empathy is actively punished and aggression is rewarded with survival.
Precisely. And so the paradox is this. We take people whose behavior is already antisocial or problematic. We place them in a deeply toxic environment that is statistically guaranteed to exacerbate their worst traits.
Yeah.
And then we magically expect that same environment to rehabilitate them. We're essentially expecting a delicate flower to bloom in a dark, toxic cave.
It's like sending someone to a chain-smoking lounge for 10 years to cure their asthma, and then acting shocked when they come out coughing.
Yeah.
I mean, how can we possibly expect mental health to blossom in an ecosystem that relies on domination and control?
That analogy hits the nail on the head, and it highlights why the sources insist that true transformation requires so much more than just adding a few programs to a punitive environment.
You can't just slap a Band-Aid on it.
You really can't. You
Yeah.
can't just build a woodworking shop or, host a 1-hour anger management class on Tuesdays and consider the job done.
Right.
The entire institutional culture matters. If the architecture, the way the guards speak to the inmates, the daily strip searches, and the very atmosphere of the prison constantly scream the message, you are an animal, you are worthless, and you are dangerous,
Then what?
then a 1-hour therapy program saying you have value and you can change is instantly destroyed.
The environment completely drowns out the intervention. The louder, more pervasive message of worthlessness wins out every single time.
Exactly. A genuinely transformative prison would need to preserve dignity across every single hour of the day. It would need to encourage autonomy, foster meaningful human relationships between staff and inmates, and fundamentally maintain hope.
Which feels like the exact opposite of what most prisons currently do.
It is. And this connects to a deeper, more insidious problem highlighted in the text: the psychological damage of dehumanization through labeling.
The creation of the criminal identity.
Yes. One of the greatest dangers of any prison system is the manufacturing of this monolithic category.
Right. Lumping everyone into one bucket.
Once a person's entire complex human identity is reduced to that one single word criminal, society's empathy simply shuts off.
It's like a switch flips.
It really is. It becomes incredibly easy for the public to look at horrific conditions, overcrowding, or violence in prisons and just shrug. We start believing their suffering simply doesn't matter, that their human rights are somehow conditional, and that they are fundamentally a different species from the rest of us.
But the material pushes back against this incredibly hard. It argues that committing a serious wrong, even a horrific one, does not erase every moral claim a person possesses. They remain human beings.
Right. And insisting on preserving their humanity leads us directly to one of the most difficult, uncomfortable questions in this entire deep dive.
Oh, here we go.
Because it is very easy for us to talk about humanity and rehabilitation when we are discussing, say, a 19-year-old who committed a nonviolent property crime.
Sure, that's easy to sympathize with.
But what about those who have done the absolute worst?
Right. If the environment is so corrosive that it destroys a person's humanity, it forces us to ask a really difficult question about the people we have decided are never, ever going home.
The lifers.
What about the extreme edge cases?
Uh,
The mass murderers, the serial abusers, the people who commit repeated extreme violence and, for the sheer safety of society, will absolutely never be released.
it's the ultimate test of the theory.
It is. Should society still invest resources in offering them transformation? I mean, if they're never going to walk out those gates, why should we care about their psychological growth?
The sources offer a profound answer to this, and it requires us to separate two concepts: the instrumental value of rehabilitation and its moral value.
Okay, let's break that down. So the instrumental value is just the practical side, like we fix them so they don't victimize anyone else when they get out.
Yes,
But if they aren't getting out, that instrumental value just drops to zero.
exactly. But the moral value is entirely different. The moral value is about the human capacity for realization.
What does that mean in this context?
The text argues that developing genuine remorse, cultivating empathy for the people you hurt, taking true internal responsibility, and achieving a higher moral understanding, these are profoundly meaningful human achievements in and of themselves.
Even if that realization happens entirely alone, within a 6x9 concrete cell.
Even then, because human beings should not be treated as permanently frozen in time at the absolute worst moment of their lives.
That's a powerful way to frame it.
Think about it. A person who committed a murder at age 20 is a profoundly different biological and psychological entity at age 60.
Right.
Achieving that moral change doesn't erase the horrific crime. It doesn't bring the victim back. And it certainly doesn't mean they should be released from confinement.
Right, the confinement stays.
Exactly. A prison system can maintain absolute lifelong accountability and physical confinement while still leaving the door open for internal moral redemption.
But wait, let's look at this from the other side. I have to play devil's advocate here on behalf of the victims.
Okay.
Because if a justice system focuses all of its philosophical bandwidth, its resources, and its energy on making the offender a better person, on helping them find peace and moral clarity, aren't we erasing the victim?
That is a very real fear.
Doesn't the system run the risk of becoming so obsessed with the redemption of the perpetrator that the person whose life was ruined just fades into the background?
That is a deeply valid concern, and it is a trap that purely reformative systems can easily fall into.
Because you can't just ignore the harm.
Exactly. A transformative model absolutely cannot make the mistake of becoming so hyper-focused on the offender's journey that the victims disappear from the equation. A system cannot simply say, well, we rehabilitated the offender, they feel terrible about what they did, so the ledger is clean.
Because the harm, the trauma, the loss, the physical damage still exists out here in the real world.
The harm still matters immensely. Victims have incredibly complex, enduring needs. They require absolute safety, first and foremost.
Of course.
But they also require societal acknowledgement of what was done to them. They need truth, they need compensation, and they need a definitive sense of justice.
It can't just be a one-sided healing process.
Right. Transformation of the offender must exist strictly alongside robust accountability and a formal recognition of the victim's suffering. This is where models like restorative justice come in, where appropriate.
Okay.
The bottom line from the text is unwavering. Justice cannot become purely offender-centered at the expense of those who are harmed. The scales have to balance both realities.
Which is a frankly staggering balancing act. You are asking a single institution to punish proportionately, protect the public flawlessly, transform the offender completely, and center the victim's needs all at the exact same time.
It's a massive, almost impossible order.
And honestly, it makes me wonder if a physical prison is even the right tool for all these jobs in the first place.
This raises an important question, and it is one the material tackles head on. Do we use incarceration too broadly?
I think we do.
Have we made the prison cell the default response to almost every single societal failure?
I call this the sledgehammer approach.
The sledgehammer approach, I like that.
Because when you look at the research, there is a vast menu of alternatives for addressing harm. We have community service, robust financial restitution, supervised clinical treatment for addiction,
Electronic monitoring, intensive probation.
restorative justice panels, mandatory education. There's so many precise tools in the toolbox.
And yet for decades, society keeps reaching for the sledgehammer.
Exactly. If prison is our only tool, every societal issue looks like a nail. We are using a sledgehammer to fix a leaky faucet.
It's overkill.
Let's really walk through what that looks like. Say someone commits a nonviolent drug offense or repeated petty theft. We hit them with a sledgehammer. They go to prison for 2 years.
Okay, 2 years.
In the first week, they lose their job. By month 2, they are evicted from their apartment, their car is repossessed. If they have kids, the family structure shatters, often leading to foster care.
The collateral damage is massive.
It really is. By the time they get out, we haven't just punished them, we have utterly destroyed the foundation of their life. And then we act completely shocked when the plumbing shatters, the house floods, and they reoffend just to survive.
The fallout of automatic default incarceration is devastating, not just for the individual, but for the entire community.
It ripples out.
It does. When we use prison for offenses that don't strictly require physical incapacitation, we create massive, cascading, systemic crises.
Like what?
Well, we create extreme overcrowding inside the facilities, which makes any attempt at rehabilitation impossible and makes violence inevitable.
Right.
We breed institutionalization where people forget how to function in a free market. We shatter families, creating generational cycles of trauma and poverty.
Which just guarantees more crime down the road.
Exactly. And as you mentioned, we erect insurmountable legal and social barriers to future employment, which practically guarantees cycles of reoffending.
It is a self-defeating loop. We are manufacturing the very danger we are trying to protect ourselves from.
We are. The material argues that prison makes the strongest logical and moral sense in very specific constrained scenarios.
When is it actually justified?
When someone presents a serious, immediate physical danger to the public, or when the offense is so severe that it explicitly requires a substantial deprivation of liberty to adequately express society's condemnation, or when all other lesser sanctions have proven clearly inadequate. But if we start our justice philosophy by asking a different question, who actually needs to be physically imprisoned at all? We drastically shrink the footprint of the entire prison system.
Right. We saved the sledgehammer for tearing down a concrete wall, not for hanging a picture frame.
Perfect analogy.
So, if we can agree that prison shouldn't be for everyone, how do we design it for the people who truly, absolutely do need to be there?
This is where we synthesize everything we have discussed today. The sources provide a master plan for building what they call the morally defensible prison.
The ideal system.
Right. And the key revelation here, the real breakthrough in the research, is that those 3 competing goals we started with, punishment, protection, and transformation, do not actually have to cancel each other out.
Wait, really? They can be harmonized if you design the system correctly.
Yes. And the way they harmonize is brilliant in its structural simplicity.
How does it work?
The text suggests this breakdown. The sentence itself, the actual mathematical loss of liberty and time mandated by the judge, is the punishment.
Okay.
The secure walls, the cameras, and the physical perimeter provide the protection for society. And the daily environment, the culture, and the resources inside those walls provide the transformation.
Oh, I love that. It compartmentalizes the goals so they don't corrupt each other.
Exactly.
The judge's gavel is the punishment. The concrete wall is the protection. The daily life inside is the transformation. It seems like a truly just system separates the act of confinement from the experience of confinement.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
You lose the right to go where you want, but you do not lose the right to be treated like a human being.
That is a perfect distillation of the text's philosophy.
Ugh.
And to make that theoretical harmony a reality, the sources outline 5 foundational pillars for building this morally legitimate system.
Let's hear them.
These are not optional add-ons, by the way. They are load-bearing requirements.
I want to spend some serious time on these because this is the blueprint for how we actually fix this. Let's start with pillar number 1, proportionality.
Yes, proportionality.
This means sentences must actually reflect the seriousness of the crime, the culpability of the offender, and the genuine empirical needs of public safety.
They can't just be arbitrary numbers pulled out of a hat.
Right. They cannot be arbitrarily excessive just to make a political point during an election year. If a judge hands down a decade-long sentence for a minor offense just to look tough on crime, it destroys the moral legitimacy of the entire punishment.
Exactly. A disproportionate sentence breeds deep, justified resentment, which makes rehabilitation impossible. Moving to pillar number 2, human dignity.
And this one is non-negotiable, right?
Completely non-negotiable. Even within the most secure walls, prisoners must retain basic human rights.
What does that look like in practice?
This means adequate physical and mental health care. It means absolute physical safety from violence or abuse by staff or other inmates.
No more looking the other way.
Exactly. It means humane living conditions, sunlight, decent food, clean air. And crucially, it means meaningful human contact with the outside world.
Because if you strip away dignity, you are effectively adding unauthorized cruelty to the punishment, which we already established as unjustifiable. You are turning the state into an abuser.
Precisely.
Pillar number 3 is rehabilitation. And we mean real rehabilitation, not just a faded brochure for a class that never actually meets.
Right. No lip service.
We are talking about meaningful, robust access to high-level education, vocational skills that actually translate to the modern job market, not just making license plates.
They need skills they can actually use.
Yes. It requires intense psychological support and evidence-based addiction treatment. The environment must actively foster and reward cognitive growth, not just passively permitted in the background.
Which leads directly to pillar number 4, and this might be the most overlooked critical aspect of all: reintegration.
I want to heavily emphasize this one because the realities of this are frankly infuriating. Reintegration means the system must actively help the offender prepare for their return to society before they are released.
Before they walk out the gates.
Yes. It means helping them secure stable housing. It means connecting them with employers who hire formerly incarcerated people. It means getting them basic documentation like a state ID, a birth certificate, or a driver's license ready to go on day one.
Because think about what happens right now.
It's a disaster. We drop someone on the curb with a bus ticket, $40, and no ID. And on top of that, they have a felony record that legally prevents them from renting a decent apartment, getting a student loan, or being hired for most jobs.
It is an invisible secondary sentence that never ends.
Exactly. Society is continuing to punish them long after the judge's sentence has expired. We are making a legal, normal life practically impossible.
We set them up to fail.
We demand that they become law-abiding taxpayers, but we legally bar them from the very mechanisms of a lawful life. We are essentially forcing them back into the underground illegal economy just to survive, and then blaming them when they reoffend.
It is the ultimate structural hypocrisy of our current system. If you want people to integrate into society, you cannot legally banish them from it.
Right.
And finally, pillar number 5, accountability. We must be clear that transformation does not mean pretending the crime never happened.
That's not a get-out-of-jail-free card.
No, does not mean a free pass. It means offenders are actively encouraged and required to deeply understand the mechanics of what they did, to confront the reality of the specific people who are harmed, and to truly internalize what taking responsibility means.
It's not an easy way out.
Yeah.
Real accountability is a very difficult, very heavy psychological reckoning.
It's excruciating for some.
It is much harder to look at the damage you caused and feel genuine remorse than it is to just sit in a cell and be angry at the guards.
It requires immense courage. So if we connect all of this to the bigger picture, to pull the lens all the way back, the way a society designs its prisons reveals its most deeply held core beliefs about human beings.
It's a mirror. It shows us exactly who we are.
It is the ultimate mirror. If a society builds a system that is entirely punishment-centered, where the walls are bleak, the food is rotten, and violence is ignored, It reveals a foundational belief that bad actions indicate fundamentally irreversibly bad people.
It writes them off completely.
It broadcasts a belief that those people only deserve suffering, full stop.
Yeah.
But if a society leans into a rehabilitation-centered model, it reveals a profoundly different worldview.
What does that reveal?
It reveals a belief that while people are absolutely responsible for the harm they cause, they are also infinitely capable of becoming something different.
And to be fair, the material is careful to say that neither view should become a cartoonish oversimplification, right?
Exactly.
We are being naive. Some people do remain dangerous forever. Some crimes are so horrifically damaging they demand severe, lifelong consequences. And yes, some offenders will fiercely, violently resist any attempt at rehabilitation.
But the foundational question for us as a society remains. Do we build our vast institutions entirely around the absolute worst thing a person has done in their past? Or do we also build them around the capacity of what that person may still become in the future?
That's the real test.
The text notes that this is not just a question of criminal justice policy. It is a profound existential question about human nature itself.
Which brings us to the most powerful takeaway from this entire deep dive. It is the one concept that really synthesizes everything we've unpacked today.
Let's hear it.
A just prison should restrict freedom when justice and safety require it, but it should never destroy the person it confines.
Because a society gains absolutely nothing by taking someone who caused harm, locking them in a concrete box of trauma for a decade, and returning them to our streets more violent, more alienated, and less capable of living an ordinary life.
We have to ask what kind of neighbor we hope eventually walks back through that prison gate.
Exactly. And that leaves us with a final thought to really mull over, building on what the sources asked about what a prison reveals about its creators.
So what does this all mean for you listening?
If a system is designed purely to inflict suffering rather than to foster transformation, what does that communicate to the rest of the world about our values?
That's a haunting question.
If we intentionally build, fund, and maintain institutions that assume human beings are completely incapable of redemption, are we ultimately constructing a society that has lost its own capacity for empathy? We shape our prisons, yes, but eventually those prisons shape us.
That is a heavy, incredibly vital thought to leave on. We started today by talking about the invisible architecture of freedom, the ability to choose your breakfast, walk to the store, and live your life.
The things we take for granted.
Right. And we've seen how the total systemic removal of that freedom is the ultimate power a society wields over an individual. The question isn't whether we should have that power, but whether we wield it to break people down or to build a safer, more human world.
Well said.
Thank you all so much for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. We hope it gave you a new lens through which to view these immense systems. Keep questioning the structures around you, keep looking closely at the invisible architecture of your own freedom, and we'll catch you next time.